Hello, everyone online. Hope you're doing well. We're doing well, I think. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made as a monk was trying to get enlightened. Definitely is a bad move because, I mean, as a monk, how can you help it? You have all these biographies of this Kubajan and that saint, and then all the talk of attainment and Theravada, this state of samadhi and that state of realization, and you have your own little experiences. So it's a setup because it's, well, for many reasons. One of the reasons is that the idea of getting something has to be in time, correct? If I haven't got it now and I want to get it in the length of a retreat or at some time in the future, my mind is creating a sense of self. Not necessarily, but for me, this was the case. My mind's creating a sense of me being somehow not enlightened, definitely not enlightened, couldn't be enlightened. And then trying to get to that place, which I had read about, heard about, or had some experience, which was enlightenment. And that is a fallacy because the unconditioned is not in time. It's not something that you get by doing something now to get something later with an ego mindset. If you, this is not hard to understand, but it's sometimes hard to understand. So if you go back to well, at least this is the way I've perceived the teaching and not modeled, used my intellect to understand. So for me, the statement, there is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn. If there were not the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, there would be no liberation from creation, from birth and death, from the round of birth and death. So and the way I interpret that, there must be something here and now which I'm not noticing. And why is that? Why am I not noticing it? So then, if you look at the Four Noble Truths, which we say is the first teaching. So I remember the English word I was looking for. It's an allegory. That was the word I was looking for. So an allegory in English is a story with a protagonist that is well known, but it's a story that's painted for moral value rather than a real historical experience or incident. So when we have the Bodhisattva being fed up with life and then going out with Channa, the charioteer, and seeing an old person, a sick person, a corpse, and a sadhu, I don't think that's, I don't think that happened in real time like that, because that's too childish for me. I don't think life is like that. I can't believe that after 39 years, the Bodhisattva hadn't seen someone with flu or gout or being sick. Obviously, that was going on. So for me, as an allegory, it's we don't notice these things until we notice them. Kind of like let's say I'm a younger person and life is going well, da 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 da, and then I'm 30 years old, 4 years old. I see a bit of Buddhism, and then my brother dies. Oh, my brother died. Oh yeah, there is death. I'm shocked. And how many beings have changed their lives because they get that kind of a shock? Someone's died. So And we chant, I'm of the nature to age, I have not gone be aging. I am of the nature to sicken, have not gone beyond sickness. I have the nature to die, have not gone beyond dying. We chant that as a reflection. And I think it's not just a reflection so that we adapt to old age, sickness, and death. That's certainly the case. If you keep reminding yourself that death happens when it happens, you somehow in your world, in your view of life, when something dies, at least you've accepted that that's normal, although you're still shocked by it. But I think there's more to that, because the more to that for me would be the statement, there is the unconditioned, there is the unborn, there is the deathless. So if you just had in Buddhism, I'm of the nature to sick and I have the nature to age, I have the nature to die, and you didn't have, also have the possibility of enlightenment, then you'd only have three Devadutas. You'd only have the first three. But you wouldn't have actually Buddhism. You'd have a kind of philosophy of sort of reality, truism, whatever you want. But we do have that statement. We do have the Buddha's enlightenment, and that for me is the first statement of faith in my own way of looking at things, the first statement of faith in Buddhism, that there is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unformed. I believe in that. Now, from that, what can I deduce? Well, if I am, well, if I take then the first teaching, take the Four Noble Truths. What does the Four Noble Truths say? Well, that there's suffering, there's a cause, and there's the end of suffering. Huh? And what is the cause? The cause is attachment to desire. Bhava vibhava kama tanha, right? We all know that. And what does that point to? Well, what is say bhava tanha is about, the desire to become. That's about time. That's about me becoming something. So usually we say, you want to become rich, you want to become famous. Yeah, don't, it's not worth it. But more deeply, I want to become enlightened. It's still a sense of I, and it's still a sense of time. It's bhava tanha. So if I set up my meditation, which I did in error as a young monk and as a middle-aged monk, but no longer as an old monk. I set myself up. I am now going to become enlightened. That was what we call bhava tanha. And then if I have that and I don't see that, then I continually frustrated, even though I might get some cool experience, or whatever peaceful experience, because I constructed it with time and effort and all of that and methodologies, then when it changes, I feel disappointed. So one of the ways we learn in meditation about bhava tanha is through defeat. You try and you try and you try and try and you get something, but it goes and you realize it can't be about becoming. It can't be about getting somewhere. It has to be about here and now. And then if you have bhava tanha, then you have vibhava tanha, all the things we don't want. Huh? We don't want our emotions. We don't want bad knees. We don't want relationships which are sour. We don't want, we don't want. So both of those wantings, um, attachment to those creates suffering. And then kama tanha is the whole nature of our minds being distracted by sense experience. So kama tanha is about sense experience. And for me, the way I interpret it, and then sense experience, you might get a really good, lovely retreat. This is a beautiful retreat. We're all happy. We're almost enlightened, etc., etc. It's obviously don't attach to it. Don't attach to the weather. This has got to be the best weather I've experienced in my life, right? And I just heard from the monks that we're having an ice storm. Like everything, the rain is falling and then it's freezing on the ground, which is the worst existential experience you can imagine. So obviously I'm not going to attach to weather. But the mind always going outside to sense experience. What happens then? My mind is then always involved with that which is changing. Anicca dukkha anatta. That's why we stress anicca dukkha anatta. Don't look for the unconditioned in the conditioned. So don't look for the unconditioned in happiness. Sense happiness is happiness, but it's not peace because it changes. Beauty, beauty is beautiful in whatever way you want, but it's not permanent. Changes. So don't seek the permanent in the impermanent. Don't seek the conditioned. Don't seek the unconditioned in the conditioned. So what have you got left? I mean, if you understand that, first of all, you have to take that on board. Does that make sense to you? Does that and why it makes sense to me that the chronology of this teaching, that you have the statement of his realization, and then you have the first incident, apparently in our text, where he says to a trader, I am the all-enlightened one, I am the all-realized one. And the trader says, good for you, mate, and moves on. And then you have the Four Noble Truths to the Panchavagya, right? And why that? Why not? Why not something else? Why that? Well, it seems to me what he's telling us is what not to do. Don't try to become enlightened. Don't try to go somewhere. And it seems to me that what the way my teachers have taught me this is it's more about letting go, abandoning craving, abandoning the sense of time, abandoning becoming, abandoning trying to get rid of. So it's that's why in the Thai forest tradition, we talk all about letting go rather than becoming. Now, what happens if you pick that kind of language up? Well, letting go always has to be here and now. To me, I think that makes sense. So that, and if I use that model of the Four Noble Truths, so I'm sitting in meditation and I'm feeling bored and restless. Now, if I can see that boredom and restlessness is something that I don't want, and I can witness the wanting and not attached to not wanting, the wanting ceases, and things are as they are. So my strategy hasn't been to get a different experience. I want to get a different experience from this experience of boredom, nothing happening. No, I'm going back to the Four Noble Truths, and I'm looking, what's the real problem here from the Buddhist teaching? From my desire mind, the real problem is I'm bored. And I'd like some samadhi, or I'd like some devas, or anything. I'll take anything, thank you. Something happy, something enlightening. But certainly I don't want this boredom and pain. So the problem is not the boredom and the pain, it's the tanha. Now, what happens if I witness the tanha and I'm aware of the tanha and I don't attach to the tanha? What happens? It ceases because its nature is anicca dukkha anatta. And now I found peace with the way things are, not in a future trying to get rid of this, but with this right now, here and now Dhamma. And that's what we mean by Nirodha, the cessation of wanting. How do you realize the cessation of wanting? Do you realize the cessation of wanting by getting something else? Maybe, I don't know. Never worked for me. You could say, well, you can get the cessation of wanting if you get to this place called Nibbana, right? I think in KL it's a place for ashes, right? I think, and anyone here from KL? I think in what do you call a place where you keep ashes? Again, that's it, columbarium. There's a columbarium in KL. It's called Nirvana. So then popular culture says, I want to go to Nirvana. Okay, great, go for it. It's just beyond Phuket. And so what happens in popular mind is that Nibbana either comes like a realm or a place you go to, and then I am not enlightened and I want to go there. That's the way it gets portrayed in popular culture. But desire is something that's always here and now. And what happens if I can see the desire right now, I witness it, and it ceases, then I begin to actually go, my attention is now no longer outwards with the experience of boredom. It just stays where it is, here and now, here and now, here and now. And that relinquishment or letting go of tanha, vibhava tanha in this case, opens the mind to silence. I realize silence. Silence is always there. Why? Because I've just stayed home. I haven't run away from this moment to get another kind of a moment. I've just stayed home. I found this especially true with like I always say, like with fear. Say with fear and anxiety. As I learned how to see that, because I thought with fear and anxiety, I had to get samadhi to get rid of the fear and anxiety. So if I got some samadhi, I could get rid of it. So I'd get some kind of samadhi, not rocket ship samadhi, but good enough samadhi, something okay. And then of course the fear would still come back. It would just come back into my mind. And I'd talk with Luangpor Viradhammo. He says, no, no, look at the Four Noble Truths. Take it deeply, look at each moment and contemplate the attachment to desire. Use the Four Noble Truths like that. So sometimes we get so caught up with attainments and samadhis and these different ways of talking that we forget the context of all that language is nirodha, the cessation of craving, peace. So it seems to me that we should always put whatever right effort is, whatever we call samma samadhi, in the context of craving and its end. That's the way I find useful, and that's the way I was taught. Then you have Luangpor Sumedho's phrase, trust in awareness. And what does that mean? Well, if I'm feeling like I'm not getting anywhere in this retreat, or nothing's working, and I say to myself, what's it like now? Then I trust in awareness. What does it really feel like right now? And then what happens is my mind begins to really look at the way things are. And that's samadhi. I look at the way things are. Very simple. And then if I watch the way things are, I will probably notice that whatever I have to notice, and insight will arise. Insight won't arise if I don't have a good look. Insight can only arise if I have a good look. So again, with my example of fearfulness and self-consciousness and anxiety, I didn't understand the problem. I didn't understand that the problem was not the fear, but the problem was the desire not to have the fear. And so I kept trying to do things to get rid of the fear. I would do metta bhavana, and I would do a subhagamatana, and a da-da-da-da-da-da. But I never really looked at the problem. And then Luangpor Sumedho said, no, you're not really, you're just trying. You're diligent and all that, but you're not using wisdom. You're not really looking at what the Buddha asks us to look at. So then I kind of went back, okay, this is anxiety. What do I want to, okay, what's the desire? What's the desire there? And as I began to see that it was the Vedana of fear that created the desire, and I could be with the unpleasantness of fear, Vedana is Vedana, then the fear started to cease. And so the desire was first to cease, and then the fear. And then that kind of practice is not about time. It's about here and now, here and now. Now, there is a time component to it, sure. Over time, my fears and anxieties have gone away, and the desire is contingent upon fear and anxiety. That was my character. Certainly, over time, they do cease, but it's not a me doing something to get something in time. It's always Here and now Dhamma, here and now Dhamma, here and now Dhamma, here and now Dhamma. The rest takes care of itself. Insight takes care of itself. The silence of the mind becomes obvious. So I don't know, how do you see the Buddhist project? That's the way my mind has come to a wholeness around this teaching. So when I think in those terms, then everything makes sense to me. Dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Why talk about that? Well, dependent origination is showing you what happens in time. That this condition arises dependent on that condition, and that condition then arises dependent on the next condition, dependent arising. Huh? And the language of the unconditioned is, so that's sankata, sankhara. We say sankhara, right? Constructed things, condition other constructed things, condition other constructed things. So the camera is constructed, people watching online watch dependent on the camera functioning. The camera function is dependent on the electricity or the battery and dependent on the internet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's on a line of sankata or dependently origination going on. And the statement from what I understand about the enlightenment of the Buddha is that what we call nibbana or enlightenment is asankata. It's not constructed. It's not made. It's not a made thing. So what is not made? So as your mind becomes more like in the present moment, at least that most of us, I think, we start to, what's not constructed? What's not dependent on one thing, like your emotions, they're dependent on your health, on, what your partner said to you this morning, what your childhood was. Da, 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 da. Your body is dependent on how your age, either what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste, what you think, the emotions you have. They're all dependently originated, aren't they? They're not independent. So because they're not independent, you don't rely on them. You don't rely on emotions, do you? I mean, that's a bad thing to do. Your emotions are not reliable. You bear with them or you enjoy them. So what is not, again, what is not dependent? And that's the kind of contemplative query or questioning that has always been important to me. So what is here and now? Akalika Dhamma. Each one has to see for themselves, not a matter of time, not a matter of desire. You start to use that language, not in a analytical way, but more in a quiet observation way. It's different than analysis. So then I put that question to myself many years ago. So here I am. What is not constructed? And for me, it was a process of elimination. The light fixtures, constructed, not reliable. Sense experience, all sense, the khandhas, all not reliable. Da, 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 da. You eliminate. What have you got left? You've got presence, consciousness, awareness. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. And what's that? Well, that's not a thing. Can you touch awareness? Can't touch awareness. Is it big? Can you see the limit of awareness? Is it like 40 foot long? Can you find a center of awareness? I can't put any description on it because it's not an object. That's the thing. It's not an object. So then the conclusion I come to, just watching, is that all objects arise and cease, all sense objects, they arise and they cease, but I wouldn't be able to see them, notice them, know them if there was something which was not an object. And that to me is awareness. And so when I kind of would contemplate that, then my mind would start to observe awareness itself. What is awareness? And that was the limit. I couldn't go any further. I could only be aware. And then the insight to trust in awareness became stronger because I cannot trust an objective experience. I can do things to have, like I can put milk in coffee, or I can cut my toenails, or I can have objective experiences, and I do. But this is different. This isn't about happiness and comfort and pleasure. This is about deep peace, deep peace. Huh? So then from that conclusion, I saw more and more that my attempt to get enlightened was based on an ego assumption. I am someone who has to become something. From my texts and literature, and the very idea that I am anything to me became, no, you can't think like that, because the whole sense of I am is just a construct. I am anything is just a thought. And so what you're left with is awareness knows change. And there is no self-identity in that. There's just awareness. There is something going on, but as soon as I say, I am aware, you could say that, but that's just a thought that comes and goes. But then when that thought ceases, there is just awareness. So begin to trust that, just trust in awareness. Of course, not for long. And after maybe 5 minutes, I would say, I can't be this. It must be something else. And then I'd have a doubt. Okay, read the book. What is consciousness, or what is, and I get more confused because I wouldn't see the doubt as an object. I would be the subject trying to figure out the doubt through thinking. Thinking is sankhara. Thinking is a construct. Thinking is anicca dukkha anatta. Thinking is not the way. Silence is the way. So thought which brings you to silence, to me, is important. Thought which brings you to more thought is confusing. And the heart. So what about the heart? Well, what do you think Nirodha might look like? So we say the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion. Yep. The cessation of craving. Yep. But what might it look like? Might it not look like the Brahma Viharas? So what happens? What happens when you are just available to life, and then you're cool. Your mind isn't preoccupied, and then a child comes up to you with a little drawing of whatever the child wants to draw, and the child is like super happy. Oh, look at you. I draw this. Aren't you happy? Aren't you also happy with a child? Now, that's not craving. That's not coming from getting what you want. It's coming from being available to life. So my sense of it is once we get out of the way, once we let go of trying to get something for ourselves and getting enlightened and so on, and we deal with our stuff. We deal with our issues. We look at our resentments, and we look at our fears. We're really honest in witnessing those. As those begin to cease, what naturally manifests? Brahmaviharas, don't you think? Isn't Brahmaviharas the result of enlightenment? Or is it enlightenment? Seems to me. Otherwise, Nirodha might sound like it's just nothing. Okay, I got Nirodha. Thank you, mate. But we're beings who are sensitive and aware and so on. And that's why for me, the way I practice and try to relate the practice, those two are important. The awakened mind, so I use background, foreground. You can use what you want, and the open heart. And so that makes it very simple for me. Intellect is not simple. Intellect is very complex. So if I use the intellect, say with weaving, I'm doing something very complex. And I use intellect for that. But for this, I use wisdom more. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is the innate ability to know how things are. Like you're sitting here, you know how things are. You don't have to figure it out, do you? How is it now? And you just know. You feel tired, you feel hot. It just know. So there's in awareness is also wisdom, satipanya going on. The more I open my mind to the background, and we have This is a long one, I'm sorry, but um, it's more complex. Um, the model of background foreground, we have other models. We have ocean. You like that one? Ocean and the rough waves on top of the ocean. So you have the Pacific Ocean, and there's a typhoon going across. There's all kinds of typhoons moving around these days, aren't there? And but deep, 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 deep down in the ocean, it's quiet, it's peaceful. That's background foreground. So the waves and the typhoon, that's traffic jam in Delhi. How about that? Or in Bangkok, or someone in the family having a nervous breakdown, or you win the lotto, or whatever. That's the typhoon. But the awareness of that is the deep ocean. And the more you turn to that, the more you touch deep silence and contentment and fulfillment. Another one is page. You know that one? So you have print. So usually you only look at the print. Breakfast, and you look at that for sure. 7 o'clock, well, reflections and kind of many well, lunchtime like that. So your attention, your, your attention is on the print, but the print depends on the white. If you didn't have the white of the page, you wouldn't have the print. Same analogy, background, foreground. Uh, You couldn't, you couldn't know differences. I couldn't know that there are two windows here by looking at one or the other, or two people, or 10 people, or whatever, look at one or the other, if there was something which didn't allow that to happen. Because I would only see one thing at a time, and there'd be no memory, there'd be no connection. So print, huh? That's an easy one, isn't it? Background, foreground. I think you like the ocean analogy because it kind of resounds with that sense of deep, deep, deep stillness that is possible. Is possible. So when we come back to trusting and awareness, it's very hard to trust in awareness when your experience is unpleasant. Yeah? So your experience is unpleasant. If you have to do something about it, if you've been bitten by a snake or you've got toothache, you do something about it. You're not foolish, but just the restlessness of a meditation. The restlessness is like this. I don't want it. Ah, there you go. Now you're practicing Four Noble Truths. Or you come to an interview, 5 people in it. This is classic. It happens every retreat. Come to the interview, 5 people in an interview, 4 are talking about dullness, and 1 has seen devas. So if you're the dull one, you walk away from the interview thinking, oh, I want some devas. Oh, please give me some devas. Or whatever the person said, shunyata or all the, and you try to get that. And how did you do that? I want to get some of that. You can't tanha. You can't. That happens every retreat. Interviews are fun. They're really, really fun that way. So if you use Four Noble Truths for awakening to the way things are, then that's certainly classic Theravada Buddhism. And then you see that in the ceasing of wanting, you start to touch the deep silence of the mind. So then you get language like the language I like to use, desirelessness. That's not a word we use much, but it makes sense in terms of nirodha. So in terms of making effort, desirelessness. Well, what does that do to your mind? Or, how I use this language, say non-becoming in terms of bhava, and then non-resistance in terms of vibhava. So if you study the Four Noble Truths and you really have taken it deeply, hasn't just been a exercise in high school Buddhism kind of thing. You've really taken a word like bhava deeply and thought about it for at least a year, or vibhava for 2 years. And you've really, 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 really considered the word. I'm not saying you believe in it, but you've considered it deeply. Then, because you've considered it deeply, and then you start to get some language to awaken you to that, how that works in the mind. So with me, with say fear and anxiety. I would use language like sometimes I would name the fear. I'd call it Gregory. Hello, Gregory. How you been? I haven't seen you for a while. So I'd begin to welcome that feeling of fear into my mind, or I'd say non-resistance, non-resistance. So each of us has a particular set of formations which create ego, our own histories and our whatever, and the ego patterns that come up as thought, and each of us has to figure out how can we awaken to that and not believe in it, not get caught up into it. So with me, I mean, I only have a few patterns, and each of us has a few patterns. Then that pattern taught me all kinds of techniques, like making it funny, or giving it a name, or using language like non-resistance around the same theme constantly. I got better and better at it, and then the awareness is very pure, and then the fear ceases, the anxiety ceases, because there's no more desire for it. And you start to realize what Nirodha is just this. Just a simple, lovely sense of peace and open-heartedness. Now, if there's more than that, fine. If more than that, fine. But if you try to get it, if someone says to me now, yeah, Viradhammo, you're just a mushy old monk. You're just sort of into your mantra, metta, I love you, I've always loved you. But the real stuff is this, and that. And I buy into that. Oh yeah, I've only got the love mantra. I'm just an old hippie, really. I'm really hoping, and I buy into that. I get intimidated. What happens? I suffer because I want what this teacher told me I should get, or this person told me I should get. So I've suffered that way too. Like if I read Luangpor Liam's Enlightenment piece, Mamma mia, what a that that is a piece of literature, his enlightenment. So certainly I'm not there. Nowhere near it, right? But that's okay. I just have to trust in awareness, trust in openness, let the thing evolve the way it will evolve. But certainly I've read that and say, yeah, that's what I got to do. So Luangpor Liam is a superstar, a superstar. He meditates like what, 20 hours without moving or something. Forget it, Viradhammo. You haven't got the knees for it. But even if I could do it, if I had in mind this idea that I could replicate Luangpor Liam's experience with that, it still would be desire. It still would be ego. It still would be me trying to get what someone else has. So those are incredibly inspiring. I like those teachings, but personally, I've had to be careful. That's not you. You're not Luangpor Liam, man. You're just your own guy, and you've got to figure out your own way to do this. And then there's a kind of sense of patience and waiting and figuring out and just slowly kind of moving along in the practice. And then it works. It works in whatever way it has to work. So that was a lot, wasn't it? So maybe that's enough in that. I'll use the words desirelessness, non-becoming, non-resistance. See what that does. So those three words are in line with the Four Noble Truths. And the way I use them, if I put up the word non-resistance, then I will notice resistance. So it's like a mirror, non-resistance. So acceptance, and the non-becoming. So I'll notice, I'm trying to get something, trying to get some experience. And then desirelessness. Now, how about, no, let's use non-distraction for kama tanha. So the three, bhava, becoming, I use non-becoming. Vibhava, I use non-resistance. And kama tanha, I use non-distraction. So kama tanha is really about your mind going into thinking mostly, all constantly going into thinking. So Please take a posture which is comfortable. Listen to sound. Listen to the Listen to sound and notice the changing nature of sound. And then notice the unchanging nature of awareness. Awareness knows. So I call that background. It's not really like a wall or anything. It's just a way of speaking. So notice change, sound, and that which knows is unchanging. And then go to a different sense base. Just feel your chest moving with breath. That's changing. And awareness, is that still not the same? We can't find awareness as an object, but that knowing makes the breath possible. Move between the two, breath at the chest, changing. Listen to sound, movement of sound, and the knowing. Be the knowing. Be that still knowing. So then the contemplative asks the question, is awareness dependent on sound? Is awareness dependent on bodily feeling? So in these kinds of exercises, you're noticing awareness itself rather than the objects in awareness. Starting to contemplate that. And then let's just do that bodily meditation. Bring attention to your head. Localize attention at the head. Now, non-becoming. Not trying to find any sense experience. Noticing, say, the mouth. You're not looking for anything. Non-becoming. And then non-resistance. You're not pushing anything away. Balance. Non-becoming, non-resistance. And the hard one is non-distraction, the mind going into fantasies and all of that. Non-distraction, presence. So there you have it. You have balance. Now, can we stay there? Can we just sustain this kind of balanced knowing? Feel your eyes. Same thing. Non-becoming. non-resistance, non-distraction. So we have balance. So that's what we're trying to sustain. And you forget, and you get lost, get restless, and then you come back. It's like this, non-becoming, non-resistance, non-distraction. And basically, you're just sort of building up spans of time where you can be present in this particular way without desire. The rest will take care of itself. Feel your torso. Feel the whole from the pelvis to the chest, up to the throat. Feel that as a mass of vibrations. The stillness of knowing, non-becoming, non-resistance, non-distraction. Stillness of knowing. You feel the lungs, whatever. Feel your feet touching the ground. Change the location, not from desire, just from interest. Let the feelings in the feet become conscious. Still knowing, non-becoming, non-resistance, non-distraction. Still knowing. So just please carry on in that manner, remembering still knowing of the way things are. Inevitably, you get caught up with thinking. The important there is when that thought has been interrupted, what do you do? Do you really open the mind and awaken, or do you just sort of habitually fall into anapanasati or something like that? So what's helpful to do is to somehow notice the end of a thought. So you could repeat the end of the thought. So you're thinking about home and thinking about your family. Just say a few words. My family is like this. And then stop the thought and then be in that awakened state. Don't try to get rid of thinking. You're trying to notice the gaps between thoughts. And then the silent knowing. And then a sense object, sound. And then another sense object, body. So you're sustaining this silent knowing. And then the mind gets caught up with thoughts again. You start again. End of a thought. No thought. Sound. Simple things like that. And you keep building on those simple principles.